A new side channel attack could be exposing your location in Signal, Discord, Twitter, and more. Your photos can be exposing a lot more information than you think. The European power grid may be vulnerable to attack. A new administration has taken office in the US. We're not going to talk politics, but he has made some moves that are specific to privacy and security that we're going to discuss, and more. Welcome to Surveillance Report 211, where we are dedicated to keeping you private and secure with the latest news from the past week. I am Nathan from The New Oil.
And I'm Henry from Techlore.
This week, we want to remind you that if you get value out of this podcast and you want to support us and keep us going, the best way to do that is from support from you guys. You know, it decentralizes our sources of income so that we don't become too reliant on any one thing. We have Patreon, which is recurring donations, and you get things in return for $5 a month or more. You get to join our Q&A. You also get to join our patron-only Signal chat, where we have a lot of interaction, a lot of great ideas, advice, tips, tricks, discussion. For $10 a month or more, you also get an extended version of these podcasts where we do more analysis, maybe a little more banter, some back and forth, and there's also no sponsor segment like this. And of course, if you prefer not to use Patreon, we do have LibrePay. And then of course, for the maximum amount of privacy and anonymity, we have Monero. You can donate to us directly. Or if you still want to get something in return, we do have XMR chat where you can tip us in Monero, and in return, you can ask us a question for the Q&A.
Just a quick PSA, because we're seeing a few more people concerned asking about it. Sometimes we're low energy or yawning when we record. We record these Friday nights. We say that a lot, and we both have full-time jobs. So these recording sessions can take over 2 hours to do. It's a lot that goes into these podcasts. So your support really does go a long way. Sorry if we're sometimes yawning or we're tired. We're still here, and we hope that we can still give you the news.
Our highlight news story this week. An issue with Cloudflare allows an attacker to find which Cloudflare data center a messaging app used to cache an image, meaning an attacker can obtain the approximate location of Signal, Discord, Twitter/X, and likely other chat app users. In some cases, an attacker only needs to send an image across the app with the target not clicking it to obtain their location. The obtained location data is very coarse. In some of 404 Media's tests, it showed what city or state someone was in, but did not provide more accurate information than that. The researcher who found this said it's a bit more of an oversight in the way that mobile applications work rather than a vulnerability in the actual code, but regardless, I thought it should be fixed. Cloudflare has actually since fixed this issue, and I think we'll talk, let me see.
So Cloudflare fixed the issue that allowed the researcher to directly exploit it. I was confused about this as well.
Okay.
But
gotcha.
It's like...
There may still be other ways.
I can't find a good analogy, but you can still perform this attack. The attack itself hasn't been fixed. It's just like the tool that the researcher was using to demonstrate. Required.
So they blocked that door, but there may still be other doors.
Exactly. That's pretty much what happened.
So going back to the article, for those of you wondering, what is this, how does this work, etc., the issue centers around Cloudflare's Content Delivery Network, or CDN. A CDN is a system that caches content across a massive distributed servers, then delivers content to a user based on their location. For example, The New Oil for a while was using a CDN. So what a CDN would do in that case is it basically makes a copy of my website on multiple servers around the world. And then let's say a user in India or the Philippines tries to access The New Oil. Instead of having to reach all the way around the world to Iceland, it'll hit up a server in, wherever they have, I don't know, Australia or somewhere closer. And it's supposed to reduce latency. Cloudflare partitions cache through data centers, and because of this, bad actors can very easily correlate caches and triangulate user locations. Those data centers in 330 cities become ways to potentially track somebody, albeit with very broad strokes of hundreds of miles. To do the attack, the researcher would send the target an image through the messaging app. He would then use Burp Suite, the popular web application security tool, to grab the URL of the uploaded image. Then he would use a tool he made called Cloudflare Teleport to send a request to every data center to see which data center cached the request. These queries would return the result hit or miss. With a hit, he now knows which data center the target was closest to, revealing their potential location, or likely closest to. In some cases, the attacker requires the target to open the conversation. In others, a push notification may load the image, so there is no need for the victim to open the app. The researcher said they also tested the issue on Discord, which can deliver images through a friend request, and his write-up also mentions Twitter/X. So going on about defenses, because Henry just said, they fixed this specific attack avenue, but not the issue itself. A VPN might protect people from this issue, but VPNs introduce their own security issues, and the VPN industry is full of snake oil. At the time of writing, the tool is inaccessible because Cloudflare fixed the bug it was exploiting. He said he can still broadly do the same sort of attack, but, quote, it's a little harder now. Instead of using his tool, he uses a VPN to route his traffic to different locations and then sends requests to Cloudflare's data center. So, like Henry was saying, they haven't really fixed it per se. They just kind of covered it up. I think this story is kind of straightforward. I think we've kind of given enough context and explanation. I think my main takeaways here are number one, we never like to downplay issues and say they're not a big deal, but we do like to give them context. I think for most people, this probably isn't a big deal. Like, I've been pretty open about the fact that I live in Texas. So if you were to send me a signal image and find out it's in, I don't know, Dallas or something, I don't know where I would assume Dallas, maybe Austin, but you would know, like, okay, he's in Texas. It's not a big deal. I'm very open about that. Even most people who are very private on the internet are still willing to generally say like what time zone they're in or what country they're in for the most part. So I think for the average person, this probably isn't a huge deal. That said, there are definitely some people who still don't want to give that information out, who still shouldn't give that information out due to their threat model or whatever. I think it's very important to be aware of this. And I think these are tools where, like they said, a reputable, good VPN could help. Something like Orbot could come in handy. It is worth being aware of when services are using things like CDNs. I just mentioned Session and SimpleX. I would imagine they're not impacted by this because they're decentralized and peer-to-peer, so they're probably not using data centers. But or like CDNs, I should say. So yeah, it's just it is a little bit more of a technical thing, and thankfully, again, I don't think it impacts most users, but it is something to be aware of and have on your radar, especially if you are someone who might be impacted by this, and to know what sort of things to look for when you're doing your research and consider.
I think probably the easiest way that many of our listeners can easily just thwart this issue is having like a multi-hop VPN. Um, if you already use a VPN, you're probably using one we recommend, and I think all the main ones we recommend have some kind of multi-hop. So that's probably the easiest thing to do if you just want to use your phone like normal and not have to think about this. But I have not changed any of my behavior after reading this. I think this issue should only be really a gotcha for someone who, for whatever reason, they're in like the country they live in can't be known, um, and that's I think yeah, that's pretty much it. Like that's the main, because I mean the range is like 400 miles from what I can tell. Like this isn't like isolating anyone down to even a street. So it's kind of like if you're in Europe, you might be able to tell which country someone is in using this attack. Maybe a city at best. Um, so the anonymity set is like literally millions of people, unless you're like living on a mountain away from everyone else, and then you have a different problem. Now we're going to go into data breaches, and there was a data breach hitting PowerSchool, which looks very, very bad. That is not me editorializing. That is the title of the story. So several updates to the story popped into the feed this week, and this is an article from Ars, which seems to be very comprehensive. Parents, students, teachers, and administrators throughout North America are smarting from what could be the biggest data breach of 2025, an intrusion into the network of a cloud-based service storing detailed data of millions of pupils and school personnel. The hack, which came to light earlier this month, hit PowerSchool, which is a Folsom, California firm that provides cloud-based software to some 16,000 K-12 schools worldwide. The schools serve 60 million students and employ an unknown number of teachers. Besides providing software for admins, grades, and other functions, PowerSchool stores personal data for students and teachers, with much of that data including social security numbers, medical information, and home addresses. So on January 7th, they revealed that they experienced a network intrusion. This included individuals' names, contact names, date of births, medical alert information, social security numbers, and other stuff. Since then, schools throughout the US and Canada have reported the devastating fallout. On Monday, for example, the Toronto District School Board notified parents, students, and former students that the breach exposed sensitive information of all students in the district between, get this, 1985 and 2024. So if you went to school in Toronto at any point starting in 1985, good to look into this. So last week, California's Menlo Park City and School District also said that stolen information belonged to all current students and staff, all students enrolled since the start of 2009 to the 2010 school year. So that goes way back. So this affects students, this affects teachers, this has been impacting people for the last decades from countless schools. So this is insane. And just kind of really sad insight. They claim that the personal data of 62 million students and 9.5 million teachers was swept up in this breach. So, as a response to all of this, PowerSchool really came together and they wanted to decide how to make it right. And they decided that the way to do that is to offer 2 years of free credit monitoring to all of those affected. So, thank you, PowerSchool. Sarcasm aside, this is how everyone deals with every data breach nowadays, no matter how serious or no matter how loosey-goosey it is. They give you 2 years of free credit monitoring, which is an unnecessary service. We recommend if you're impacted by this to freeze your credit. You should have already done that, and you hopefully already did that. If you listen to this podcast, everybody should freeze their credit.
And on that note, we have an update to another major data breach. United Health confirms 190 million Americans affected by Change Healthcare data breach. So that's two-thirds. Two-thirds of America, roughly. They've confirmed the ransomware attack last February affected around 190 people, nearly double previous estimates. The U.S. health insurance giant confirmed the latest number to TechCrunch on Friday after the markets closed. I'm sure that was just as soon as they found out. They just couldn't wait to get depressed, and they were like, damn, we just missed the markets closing. United Health previously put the number at around 100 million people when they filed the preliminary analysis with the Office for Civil Rights, which is the unit under the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services that investigates data breaches. So just a quick update there. Like Henry was saying, freeze your credit. At this point, everyone should just freeze their credit. It's free in the U.S. You can do it for minors. Do it for your kids. Like, freeze their credit. Just keep track of it in your what's it called, your password manager. Put on a security free, or no, a fraud alert. Put that on there too. It's kind of like 2FA for your credit. The New Oil has a page about this. It's under the most important section.
We have a lot of big stories this week. Companies. So the powerful AI tool that cops or stalkers, sometimes the same, can use to geolocate photos in seconds. It's true. Like, you have to remember that companies, cops, anybody, like, there's real people behind these. And when you give tools to people, they can use them as people. It's not always used as a cop. It's used as a person. A powerful AI tool can predict with high accuracy the location of photos based on features inside the image itself, like vegetation, architecture, and the distance between buildings, in seconds, with the company now marketing the tool to law enforcement officers and government agencies. They're called GeoSpy, and the tool has been used for months by members of the public, with many making videos marveling at the tech and some asking for help with stalking specific women. The company's founder has aggressively pushed back against such requests, and they closed off public access to the tool after 404 Media contacted him for comment. Now users have to request access, which is available exclusively to qualified law enforcement agencies, enterprise users, and government entities. GeoSpy could radically change what information can be learned from photos posted online and by whom. Law enforcement officers with very little necessary training, private threat intelligence agencies, and stalkers could, and in some cases already are, using this tech. Dedicated open source intelligence, OSINT professionals can of course do this too, but the training and skill set necessary can take years to build up. GeoSpy allows essentially anyone to do it without that skill set. So on Thursday, investigative software Mautego integrated with GeoSpy, meaning users can search images directly in Mautego. The article from 404 goes on to describe various uses for the software, both good and bad, and they tested it and they were able to correctly identify places off publicly available photos that seemingly didn't reveal much, while the CEO talked about it being used to find child abusers and such. I think that's kind of the end of the sentence, but we would say it could also be used as a tool for child abuse.
First of all, just to add on to what you said earlier about sometimes it's the cops, there's actually stories that have covered that, of the NYPD
I'm not making that up.
abusing. Yeah, just to clarify for anyone listening, like, again, that's not a political take. We have evidence that that's happened, and that's also not like dinging the cops. Like you said, that's just, they're made up of people, and people are imperfect, and sometimes even the pro-cop people will agree, garbage people make it through the cracks and do bad things. Next up, this one's just kind of a quick letting you guys know. So the latest Mac and iOS updates, 15.3 and 18.3 are out, and they have automatically enabled Apple Intelligence. So originally in 15.1, 15.2, and iOS 18.1 and .2, Apple Intelligence was opt-in, and users who wanted the feature would need to turn it on in the settings. Going forward, it will now be enabled by default, and you will have to go into the settings to turn it off. Most of the Apple Intelligence features, or at least some of them, are not done on device. Some of them are sent back, and I think Apple has found a pretty decent way to handle that. But at the same time, I'm totally in the boat of like, I don't want to use this. It doesn't interest me at all. I don't hate it. I just don't care. So I don't want it on, and I don't want Apple turning it on for me. So yeah, if you're an Apple user and you don't want this thing, go turn it off.
Microsoft's LinkedIn sued for disclosing customer information to train AI models. They're sued by premium customers who said the business focused social media platform disclosed their private messages to third parties without permission to train generative artificial intelligence models. Again, another example, I think we just talked about this in the Patreon version for the Apple story. Auto enabling AI features for people sets a dangerous precedent because not everybody does it privately. According to a proposed class action filed on Tuesday night on behalf of these customers, LinkedIn quietly introduced a privacy setting last August that let users enable or disable the sharing of their personal data. Customers said LinkedIn then discreetly updated its privacy policy to say data could be used to train AI models, and in an FAQ, hyperlink said opting out does not affect training that has already taken place. This attempt to cover its tracks suggests LinkedIn was fully aware it violated customers' privacy and its promise to use personal data only to support and improve its platform. It seeks unspecified damages for breach of contract and violations of California's unfair competition law and $1,000 per person for violations of the Federal Stored Communications Act. Good. I think that's great. We'll see if this actually pans out the way it does, so stay subscribed. But this is the kind of the garbage that we're just very fundamentally against, just auto-enabling stuff that people don't even know about. It shouldn't be people's job to check their settings every day to make sure stuff like this isn't enabled. And my God, LinkedIn does this all the time. It is a well-known dark pattern within the company. If anyone is listening and they work at LinkedIn, like I know and you know that this is all done on purpose, that they'll just come up with new things to enable. So you can go in your LinkedIn settings today, turn off all your notifications so you get no notifications at all. And then like 3 weeks later, they introduce a new form of notification that they auto-enable, and they just keep doing this pattern. They'll like change a notification setting, or they'll add a new one just for the sake of adding one and they auto-enable all this crap. And so it's just really frustrating how like people who purposely like try to disconnect from a platform are still in a lot of ways bombarded by it because of corporate greed and just obnoxiousness.
And that'll take us into research. So this one I think is more aimed at like if we have any people in the crowd who are CTOs or small business owner or big business owners, anyone who's in a position of power where you can actually like get the higher ups to listen to you and go, hey, we need to be aware of this. Employees of failed startups are at special risk of stolen personal data through old Google logins. So, a cybersecurity researcher discovered that if malicious attackers bought the defunct domains of failed startups, they could use them to log into cloud software configured to allow every employee in the company to have access, such as a chat or video app. From there, many of these apps offer company directories or user info pages where the attacker could discover former employees' actual emails. To test the flaw, he found Arey, Ayrey. Oh, no. To test the flaw that he found, the researcher bought one of the failed startups. Excuse me. To test the flaw that he found, the researcher bought one failed startup's domain and from it was able to log into ChatGPT, Slack, Notion, Zoom, and an HR system containing social security numbers. While any failed company with a domain for sale could fall prey, startup employees are particularly vulnerable because startups tend to use Google's apps and a lot of cloud software to run their business. Google actually does have tech in its OAuth configuration that should prevent the risks outlined by the researcher. However, that requires the provider to use it. It is called a sub-identifier, which is a series of numbers unique to each account. While an employee might have multiple email addresses attached to their work Google account, the account should only have one sub-identifier ever. But the researcher, working with one affected HR provider, discovered that this identifier was unreliable. According to the provider, they called it unreliable, meaning the provider found that it changed on a very small percentage of cases, 0.04%. That may statistically be near zero, but for a provider handling a huge number of daily users, it can add up to hundreds of failed logins each week. Google also flip-flopped on how important this issue was. Not surprising. At first, they dismissed the bug altogether, promptly closing the ticket, saying it wasn't a bug, but a quote-unquote fraud issue. And the article says that he agrees, but it's still, something that needs fixing. 3 months later, right after his talk was accepted by ShmooCon, Google suddenly changed their mind, reopened their ticket, and paid the bug bounty. Google has not issued a technical fix for the flaw, nor a timeline for when it might, and it's not clear if Google will ever make a technical change to somehow address this issue. The company has, however, updated its documentation to tell providers to use the sub-identifier. They also offer instructions to founders on how companies should properly shut down Google Workspace and prevent the problem. Ultimately, Google says the fix is for founders shuttering a company to make sure they properly close all of their cloud services.
This is a big story, so I'm going to try my best to condense this, but it's a really important one that really talks about the car problem. So Subaru security flaws exposed its system for tracking millions of cars. So, a couple researchers discovered vulnerabilities in a web portal from Subaru that let them hijack the ability to unlock the car, honk its horn, start its ignition, reassigning control of those features to any phone or computer they chose. Most disturbing was that they found they could also track the Subaru's location, not merely where it was at the moment, but also where it had been for the entire year that his mother owned it. The map of the car's whereabouts was so accurate and detailed that he was able to see her doctor visits, the homes of the friends she visited, even which exact parking space his mother parked in every time she went to church. So they revealed in the blog post their method for hacking and tracking, which they believe would have allowed hackers to target any of the company's vehicles equipped with its digital features known as Starlink in US, Canada, or Japan. They found in a Subaru website intended for the company's staff, which allowed them to hijack an employee's account to reassign control of car Starlink features and also access all the vehicle location data to employees, including the car's location every time its engine is started. So they reported their findings to Subaru in late November, and they quickly patched the Starlink security flaws, but the researchers warned that the Subaru web vulnerabilities are just the latest in a long series of similar web-based flaws they and other security researchers working with them have found that have affected well over a dozen car makers, including Acura, Genesis, Honda, Hyundai, Infiniti, Kia, Toyota, and many others. There's little doubt, they say, that similarly serious hackable bugs exist in other auto companies' web tools that have yet to be discovered. In Subaru's case, they also pointed out that their discovery hints at how pervasively those with access to Subaru's portal can track its customers' movements, a privacy issue that will last far longer than the web vulnerabilities that exposed it. And similar to what I mentioned earlier with the cop story, when you're trusting the police, you're trusting individuals when it comes to data collection. And so that's something that has to be taken into consideration. When you use a Subaru, did you know you're trusting potentially hundreds, thousands of employees with your location data? It's the same issue. There are lots of clear issues with this, and the researchers talked about them as well. And these aren't unique. Another researcher demonstrated to Wired that they could pull off a similar trick with millions of vehicles sold by Kia. Over the prior 2 years, a larger group of researchers discovered web vulnerabilities that affected cars, again, sold by Acura, BMW, Ferrari, Genesis, Honda, Hyundai, Infiniti, Mercedes-Benz, Nissan, Rolls-Royce, and Toyota. More unusual in Subaru's case is that they were able to access fine-grained historical location data because Subaru kept the data indefinitely. So you could just look up anything that you wanted from any time in the past. So this is your reminder with these internet-connected cars, which you have zero control over unless you actually go through with it and take control of your cars, you're not just trusting the company Subaru with your data. You're trusting all the employees of Subaru as well as how they implement their security, which means you're by extension, trusting whatever hackers get access to the system. And what do hackers do with data that they get? They post it publicly. So you have to keep in mind that when you're trusting and giving up so much data to a company that's not treating it properly and collecting way more than they need to, you are ultimately, it's not far off to say you're trusting the public with that data at the end of the day. So that's what I have to say about that. We get a lot of questions about cars. There is no recommendable car that I can share with people right now. All I can recommend is you can buy an older vehicle, but that's a Band-Aid solution because that's not going to be an option forever. And we just have to hope and keep voicing our opinions that we want cars to be more privacy respecting. So you can also try doing things like removing the cell connection, opting out of things when you can, etc. I think that's the best shot you're going to have.
All right, and this last research story says researchers say new attack could take down the European power grid. Don't panic just yet, European listeners. Late last month, researchers revealed a finding that's likely to shock some people and confirm the low expectations of others. Renewable energy facilities throughout Central Europe use unencrypted radio signals to receive commands that feed or ditch power into or from the grid that serves some 450 million people throughout the continent. Collectively, the facilities could generate as much as 40 gigawatts in Germany alone, the researchers estimate. In addition, they estimate that in Germany, 20 gigawatts of loads such as heat pumps and wall boxes are controlled via those receivers. That adds up to 60 gigawatts that might be controllable through radio signals anyone can send. The article says when they realized how much power was controlled, they wondered how much damage might result from rogue messages sent simultaneously to multiple power facilities in strategically designed sequences and times of day. By their calculation, an optimally crafted series of messages sent under certain conditions would be enough to bring down the entire grid all over Europe. So the article goes into pretty good detail about how this attack works and kind of explains how the European power grid works and how they think basically their argument is it would be a domino effect. If we can send the right messages at the right times and tell certain grids to send more power and other grids to send less power, then from there it would just trip and everything else would fall down. But grid security experts that the author talked to said they're doubtful it's possible to carry out in the real world the way it's envisioned. And even if it is, they question whether the 60 gigawatts estimate is accurate. Albert Moser, who is a professor with expertise in power grids, said both assumptions are possibly not true. He said he's unable to confirm that 60 gigawatts of generation or load is controlled by radio signals. He was also unable to confirm that security measures for radio ripple control are insufficient. Jan Hoff, another expert with experience securing the European grid against malicious hacks, said he doubted that much electricity could be dropped quickly enough to even cause a brownout. Yeah, that's kind of where we're at. Henry and I are pretty open about how we're strong believers in kind of some low-key casual disaster prepping. Have a first aid kit, know how to use it, have some food and water saved up, have some cash on hand. So more definitely extra so in this situation.
And now we're going to go into politics, and we're going to start with a Europol chief who says that big tech has responsibility to unlock encrypted messages. So this is from Catherine DeBole, who told the Financial Times she will meet big tech company groups in the Swiss mountain resort to discuss the matter, claiming that companies have a social responsibility to give the police access to encrypted messages that are used by criminals to remain anonymous. Anonymity is not a fundamental right, she said. And she also said when we have a search warrant and we are in front of a house and the door is locked and you know that the criminal is inside of the house, the population will not accept that you cannot enter. In a digital environment, the police needed to be able to decode these messages to fight crime, she added. You will not be able to enforce democracy without it. That's the story. I'm sympathetic to the cause, and I genuinely think this person means well. But here's the issue. The issue with this, if there was a way for governments to safely be able to access a message on a selective basis, and be able to catch someone that they have strong suspicion and got a warrant for, then I think most people would be in agreement for that, perhaps. I think there's always going to be purists, and of course us in the security community will always be wary of that, but that's not really possible. The way that encryption works is end-to-end encryption is either zero trust, zero knowledge, and people have their own encryption keys, and they are safe, and there are no third parties that can access the data, or there has to be some kind of backdoor in the encryption. And we've seen time and time again that backdoors for the good guys just don't exist. It's simply a backdoor. So kind of the compromise, if we were to do what this person wants, is we would make everybody less safe. I know this is kind of a no-brainer for people who listen to our podcast. It's something we talk about a lot, but we always want to repeat it for new people who think that this stuff is good, because I think all of us are in favor of having a more lawful society and having a safer society. People are healthier, less bad things happen, less evil. But there is no way to kind of accomplish what this person wants. What this person wants is essentially having, in their own analogy, everybody have the same key.
From the Department of Nobody is Surprised, government monitoring those with negative views of health insurance companies. So I have not heard of this particular outlet. It appears to be a blog. The New York State Intelligence Center, nysic.ctc, identified a large amount of negative sentiment towards healthcare executives and health insurance companies on social media. Shocker. And they said this came from a bulletin produced by a regional intelligence group on December 12th. The bulletin goes on to warn the bulletin goes on to warn of, quote, users online wanting to counter corporate greed, unquote, as well as, quote, growing negative sentiment around conglomerates, the wealthy, and executive staff at private and public organizations, unquote. The document is one of a flurry of threat reports quietly circulated to law enforcement across the country by a sprawling network of little-known intelligence organizations created in response to 9/11. Called fusion centers, groups like the New York State Intelligence Center were tasked with fighting terrorism, which the alleged killer Luigi Mangione was charged with. Today, there is at least one fusion center in all 50 states, even Wyoming, home to the Wyoming Information Analysis Team. Marked, quote, law enforcement use only in all caps. The document quoted above is, like other intelligence reports, not usually available to the public. To give a sense of just how many of these kinds of reports are pinballing around the law enforcement world, here's one produced by the Southern Nevada Counterterrorism Center and also obtained by Property of the People. Like the New York Bulletin, this one also focuses on, quote, online rhetoric, expressing, quote, criticism of the public healthcare system and corporate executives. And then he has a screenshot, and you can actually download the whole thing in the actual article. They said law enforcement is panicking over widespread support for Mangione, but it should be no surprise. And that comes from the executive director of Property of the People, which again, I want to caveat, I don't know anything about them. So if they're an extremely problematic organization, I apologize. Of course, people are angry watching loved ones needlessly suffer and die, so a handful of executives can buy second yachts. And then this is the article, or so governors can buy a second team of Fusion Center analysts. In his manifesto, Mangione suggests the health insurance industry had gotten too powerful and they continue to abuse our country for immense profit because the American public has allowed them to get away with it. He could just as easily have been describing the national security state. So I just included that last part because I thought he made a very salient point.
These are 2 Trump updates so far. So he seeks to paralyze the independent privacy and civil liberties watchdog. So Congress established this agency as an independent unit in the executive branch after the terrorist attacks of 9/11. It has security clearances and subpoena power and is set up to have 5 members appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate who serve 6-year terms. It needs at least 3 members in order to take official actions like starting a new investigative project, and pretty much they try to independently check the other agencies, other government agencies. So on Tuesday evening, each of the 3 members who were picked by Democrats received an email from the White House telling them to submit resignation letters by the close of business on January 23rd. And then also, Trump administration fired members of Cybersecurity Review Board in a, as the article describes it, horribly short-sighted decision. So the Department of Homeland Security told members of several advisory committees that they were effectively fired. Among the committees is the Cybersafety Review Board, or CSRB, which is made up of both private sector and government cybersecurity experts. For context, for people of this podcast, we've been talking about the Salt Typhoon hacks, which is the Chinese hackers who pretty much took over all of the infrastructure. This actually stops the CSRB review of China hacking the critical infrastructure. This pretty much has effectively cut out the investigation into learning about Salt Typhoon to protect ourselves better going forward. So that's a little bit of context into some things that it might impact that we've been talking about on the podcast. Another person familiar with the matter pointed out that it's interesting that the rationale is misuse of resources because all advisory board members get a rich salary of $0, so they are not paid. One of the people who's now a formal member said that the people who serve as government advisors should be judged by skills and merit, not by political affiliation. So they said they're hopeful that these critical advisory board vacancies will be filled with the most qualified people without delay. So we shall see how that proceeds going forward.
All right, this next one comes from the EFF, and it's good news. It's a victory. Federal court has finally ruled that backdoor searches of Section 702 data is unconstitutional. The landmark ruling comes in a criminal case, United States v. I'm going to screw this up, Hasbairami, who was an Iranian. The article goes into detail about his situation. After more than a decade of litigation and over 4 years since the Circuit Court of Appeals found that backdoor searches constitute, quote, separate Fourth Amendment events, unquote, and directed the district court to determine a warrant was required. Now that has been officially decreed. Quick pause there. We agree with people, like whenever we talk about these laws and like, hey, this is a good thing this was passed, there's always people in the comments who are like, oh, laws get broken all the time. You can't trust blah, 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 blah. You need to enforce your privacy with encrypted tools like encrypted messengers, encrypted email, encrypted hard drives, self-hosting. We 100% agree with you. And this is one of the reasons why. Over 10 years of having this discussion, and they finally got around to agreeing. Like, yeah, they both have their place. In the intervening years, meaning the years between, Congress has reauthorized Section 702 multiple times, each time ignoring overwhelming evidence that the FBI and the intelligence community abused their access to databases of warrantlessly collected messages and other data. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, which Congress assigns with the primary role of judicial oversight of Section 702, has also repeatedly dismissed arguments that the backdoor searches violate the Fourth Amendment, giving the intelligence community endless do-overs despite its repeated transgressions of even lax safeguards on these searches. This decision sheds light on the government's liberal use of what is essentially a finders keepers rule regarding your communications data. FISA Section 702 allows the intelligence community to collect a massive amount of communications data from overseas in the name of national security. But in cases cases where one side of that conversation is a person on US soil, that data is still collected and retained in large databases, searchable by federal law enforcement. Because the US side of these communications is already collected and just sitting there, the government has claimed that law enforcement agencies do not need a warrant to sift through them. EFF has argued for over a decade that this is unconstitutional, and now a court agrees with them.
WhatsApp wins a reprieve in India over sharing user data with Meta. So they suspended restrictions that would have barred WhatsApp from sharing user data with its parent company Meta, delivering a significant victory for Mark Zuckerberg's social media empire in its largest market by users. The ruling by the national company law appellate temporarily lifts a 5-year ban imposed by India's antitrust regulator, which had accused WhatsApp of abusing its market dominance through its 2021 privacy policy. India is the largest market for Meta and WhatsApp. More than 700 million people in the country use WhatsApp each month. While staying the ban on Thursday, the tribunal ordered Meta to deposit about $12 million, half of a larger penalty within 2 weeks. The court will next hear the case on March 17th. They expressed concern that the 5-year ban could threaten WhatsApp's business model, which provides the messaging service for free.
Okay, Pakistan's parliament passes a bill with sweeping controls on social media. This is called the Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act, and it was introduced in the National Assembly on Wednesday. Authorities would create an agency with the power to order the immediate blocking of content deemed, quote, unlawful and offensive from social media, which could include content that is critical of judges, its armed forces, parliament or provisional assemblies. Individuals and organizations posting such content may also be blocked from social media. Under the law, social media platforms would be required to register with the new Social Media Protection and Regulatory Authority, and those failing to comply could face temporary or permanent bans. The law also makes spreading disinformation a criminal offense, punishable by 3 years in prison and a fine of up to 2 million rupees, which is $7,150 US, which is quite a chunk of change. And I didn't include it here in the show notes, but of course, Pakistan's minister is like, no, this is about stopping, violence and hate speech and this, that, and the other. And not journalism, we're not going to attack journalists.
Spanish Prime Minister calls to end social media anonymity and force digital IDs. So they spoke at this annual meeting. He went on a 17-minute tirade against social media and big tech companies for being dangerous to democracies while presenting 3 solutions. 1, force social media platforms to link user accounts with the EU digital ID wallet and end anonymity. 2, force social media platforms to open the black box on their algorithms. And 3, hold social media CEOs personally accountable for non-compliance for laws and norms in their platforms. In the special address, they blamed social media companies for transforming us into a society increasingly divided and easy to manipulate, while claiming his 3 proposals would present a solution. In our countries, no one can walk the streets with a mask on their face or drive a car without a license plate. No one can send packages without showing an ID or buy a hunting weapon without giving their name, and yet we're allowing people to roam freely on social networks without linking their profiles to a real identity. This is paving the way for misinformation, hate speech, and cyber harassment because it is facilitating the use of bots, and it is allowing people to act without being held accountable for their actions. Such an anomaly can't continue, and in a democracy, citizens have the right to privacy, but not to anonymity or impunity, because with those two social coexistence would be impossible. This is why I believe we must push forward with the principle of pseudonymity as the functioning element of social media and force all these platforms to link every user account to a European digital identity wallet. The Spanish Prime Minister's remarks back up what we at The Sociable and many other researchers and outlets have warned for years, that digital ID schemes were about ending online anonymity while giving governments and corporations the power to manipulate, coerce, or incentivize changes in human behavior. So, yeah, really interesting story. And again, The Sociable is the person who wrote this. That wasn't a quote from me. But I think that it's interesting. I think it's an interesting debate, but obviously we're generally going to land on the side of being much more cautious about these tools. How is the data handled? How secure is this? What's it mean for user safety on these platforms if their identity is linked to those? What do whistleblowers do if they need to expose sensitive information, but they have to upload an ID to join a platform? So there's a lot of other questions here. And while who knows, maybe forcing users to hand over their IDs maybe would make social media a little bit better. That's still a big if. I don't personally fully believe that. But even if that's true, there still are so many other considerations that I think could actually be a downgrade at the end of the day for people. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
All right, that'll take us into the free and open source software news, FOSS news, and this will actually be our last story for the week. We didn't have any misfits, and this is a really quick story. Cryptomator for Android now on Accrescent. So Accrescent, for those who don't know, is a new third-party app store for Android, kind of like F-Droid. Except a Crescent tries to. There are a lot of concerns with F-Droid, some of which I think are kind of valid, and a Crescent aims to be a little bit more secure. So, for example, their features, and I don't know what a lot of this is, but I think some of you who care about this stuff would. App signing key pinning, signed repository metadata, automatic unattended unprivileged updates on Androids 12 and up, designed for split APKs, no remote APK signing, and no account required. It's kind of small right now in terms of the apps that are in the repository, but they are adding more all the time. And there's some familiar names there, like IVPN is in there. They don't let you see the App Store online like F-Droid does, so I
Yeah,
can't remember.
I don't like that. I wish that we could
Yeah,
see it without needing the App Store. And
yeah,
that's
for real.
yeah.
Because if I check it, I'm like, oh, you have a lot of the apps that I use. Maybe I'll use it. But
Yeah, otherwise
um,
I'm not gonna. Yeah, exactly.
it's been a while since I checked it. But yeah, they're starting to grow out. And here's another one now is Cryptomator. So Cryptomator says a Crescent aligns with our core values of security, privacy, and user control. It requires no user accounts and provides features such as signed repository metadata, app signing, key pinning, and minimum version enforcement, which is one that's missing from F-Droid that a lot of people criticize, ensuring that Cryptomator remains a trusted and secure choice for Android users. And the blog post actually goes on to mention like Cryptomator is pretty much available anywhere you can imagine. Like it's on Google Play, it's in F-Droid, now it's in a Crescent. I think it's even like it got a direct APK, maybe even GitHub for Obtainium users and stuff like that. And they make a point of saying like, look, there's different ways to get the app, and each one has pros and cons, which I think is a really cool take. So yeah, if you're an a Crescent user and a Cryptomator user, that's one more app you can get from a Crescent now. If you're not an a Crescent user but you're interested, go ahead and check it out. And yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, and for people wondering, because a Crescent might be new to some people, I'd say it's just a very different focus from F-Droid. F-Droid's main priority and its number one thing is like open source. They want free and open source, and the way they do things is entirely for that. And a lot of the reasons why people complain about the security is the fact that the F-Droid team compiles the APKs on their end. But the reason they prefer doing that is so that they can check for things like proprietary blobs, blah, 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 and then they can report that because that's their priority. A Crescent can actually host proprietary apps. It's not just an open source app store. So I think, yeah, it's a different target audience. Just kind of a heads up for people who, if you're going to try these app stores, I think they all have pros and cons. I'm not like you only use this one. I don't care actually what you use, but just know there are different pros and cons to these app stores that you should be aware of.
All right, and that was all the news we had for this week. So there's that side channel attack that could be exposing your location on Signal, Discord, Twitter, and probably more. So make sure you're aware of that and taking the proper mitigations if that fits your threat model. Your photos can be exposing a lot more information now with the rise of AI and that service we covered in the company section. So again, make sure you're being mindful of what you share online. The European power grid might be vulnerable to attack, maybe not. Just be aware, be prepared, have some water and stuff. And, administration has changed in the US. We did this with Biden, and I think Biden was in office when we started working together. So, I just forget how long we've been working together sometimes. Time is a blur, man. But anyways, what I was going to say is, we're trying our best to keep politics out of it. Trust me, I have opinions. Y'all probably know, but we're trying very much to be objective when we cover this story, and there's going to be a lot of story. There's a lot of overlap between politics and privacy, and we're going to try our best to be objective and nonpartisan when we cover the news, and we'll keep you guys updated on any privacy and security related news stories that come down from the White House or any other government, really, as we have been doing for years. If you appreciate the work we do here and you want to help support us and help keep us going, we do have Patreon, $5 a month. You get to join the Q&A. You get to join our group Signal chat with other friends and fans of the show. For $10 a month or more, you get to listen to ad-free episodes that are longer and include some of our more analysis. We have LibrePay if you don't care about any of the perks, but you just want something that's a little bit more privacy respecting and is set it and forget it recurring. If you want the maximum amount of privacy and anonymity, we do have Monero. Or again, if you kind of want that middle ground where you want anonymity and privacy, but you still want to ask us a question or get something in return, we do have XMR chat where you can leave a tip and ask a question, and we will answer it on the Q&A. That's been going really well, and we really appreciate you guys who have been doing that. So, thank you for listening to Surveillance Report. Links to all the stories can be found in the show notes. If you have a story you think we should cover, please send it to news@surveillancereport.tech. The final thing we want to ask is please share the podcast around. We don't do any traditional marketing. We don't do any advertising. So word of mouth is really the best way to spread the word, especially, coming from a trusted friend or a trusted source. People will be more inclined to listen, I hope, usually. Make sure you're subscribed. Give us a rating if you're on a platform where that's an option. We're trying to reach as many people as possible with the message of privacy, and everything you do that helps tell the algorithm that this is a good show that people want helps spread that message. So thank you again for listening, and we'll see you guys next week.